In the first two lessons, we were looking at relationships between two variables, two categorical variables, and looking at two-way tables, and then digging into those two-way tables a little bit more with relative frequency tables to analyze those tables a little bit. The third section, we're looking for associations between categorical data. So we're going to inspect patterns in relative frequency tables and two-way tables to determine if there is a possible association between the two variables of interest. So when we talk about association, we're really talking about, is there a connection or relationship between the two variables that we are analyzing. So we're going to start off with this first situation, cake or pie. The table displays the dessert preference and the dominant hand, left or right hand, for a sample of 300 people. So just like the other two-way tables, we're looking at two variables. And the variable listed in the rows here is left-handed or right-handed, so we might just call it handedness, if that's a word. I think it is. And then the variable that's on the top here, let's call it dessert preference. So within those two variables, there's two possible options, left-handed or right-handedness, and then for the dessert preference, either prefers cake or prefers pie. So notice it is a two-way table that just tallies up out of the 300 people where they fit in to each one of those categories. And what's nice about this one is we have the totals already listed here. So there's that 300 in the bottom right. You'll notice that the rows and columns are going to eventually add up to 300 if you tally those up. And so let's look at the question. For each of the calculations, describe the interpretation of the percentage in terms of the situation. So let's look at that. It says that 10% from 10 out of 100 is equal to 0.1. All right, so where does that 10 out of 100 come from? The key to a lot of these problems is to be thinking about the denominator, that number there, because that's what we are taking it out of. So we're taking it out of that total. So where do we see a total of 100? All right, up in the table, we see a total of 100 in the prefers cake column. So that's going to be key because as we've gone through the last couple of lessons, when we start to analyze the two-way tables and then take a percentage out of the two-way table, the key is to understand what does the denominator of that fraction mean. And in this case, the denominator of that fraction, that 100, comes from the total number of people that prefer cake. The 10, then up here, 10 refers to the left-handed people that prefer cake. So the bottom is the total that prefer cake, so total cake. And then the top part is the left-handed people that prefer cake. So we talked about this in the last couple lessons, but let's see if we can kind of phrase it the way we have talked about it in those lessons. So among the 100 people that prefer cake, because that's our denominator, that's what we're taking it from, all of the 100 people that prefer cake. 10 are left-handed. All right? In other words, 10% are left-handed. Ten out of 100 is 10%, or 0.11 as a decimal. Okay? So that's kind of what we're going after here. So now let's look at the next one. Let's switch colors. 67% from 100 out of 270 equals 60.67, 67 hundredths. So let's see if we can figure this out. So where does that 270, okay, so the 270 right now is the total for the right-handed row. So total right-handed. And then the 180 is the number of people that prefer pi in that group. Okay, so once again, when we're thinking about describing the interpretation of this, we're thinking about that denominator. So among the 270 people that are right-handed, because that's what we're choosing from, 180 prefer pi. So there's others that prefer pi, but out of that group of 270 that are right-handed, it's 180 that prefer pi. And 180 out of 270, as is shown here, is 67%. So 67% prefer pi of that group. Okay. And then our last one here, 30% from 90 divided by 300 equals 3/10 or 0.3. All right, so let's look at first that denominator again, that 300. Where do we see that 300? Well, the 300 here is the total people that are in the whole survey. So total people surveyed. So that's out of the whole group, not just out of a subsection of the group, but out of the whole group. And then where does the 90 come from? Well, there's our 90. And that 90 is the right-handed people that also prefer cake. Because remember, we're out of the total here. So we need to be considering where the intersection is, in this case, of the two variables that we have that are a part of that 90. Right? Because it's not just part of a row and it's not just a part of a column, it's part of the row and column because it's out of the total. So this is right-handed prefers cake. So that's a little bit more. So among the entire group of 300 people surveyed, because that's where the 300 come from. That's who we're surveying from in this case. That's the 300 representation. 90 are both, in this case, right-handed and prefer cake. So out of the total, when we talk about 90 out of 300, that's 30%, 0.3. So 30% are right-handed and prefer cake. So that would be how you would interpret each one of those percentages there. Now the next question really is, and it's not really asked in this case, is do you think there's a connection between your handedness and what type of dessert you prefer? Now, if I'm asking myself that question, I'm guessing, no, I don't think that there's really a connection between whether you're right or left-handed and prefer cake or pie. That said, you can look at the data here and maybe come up with some conclusions based on what you see here. So, I mean, it's pretty clear for right-handed people, there was definitely a stronger preference for pie than for cake. So, in an order of about twice as many. But then when we look at left-handed people, about twice as many people prefer pie to cake as well. So it doesn't seem, even though there's definitely more people that prefer pie, it doesn't seem to really be connected to what handedness you are. So you have to be a little bit careful because you do see bigger numbers there with the right-handed, but there's more right-handed people than left-handed people. So then we look at the connection between cake and pie and we see, 67% for both of those, or about twice as many people prefer pie, but it doesn't matter if you're left-handed or right-handed. So that seems to verify part of the hypothesis here that they're not really connected, but there are more pieces that you may have to analyze, and maybe something surprising does pop up and you find out, there does seem to be a connection or association or relationship between the two variables.